Hello and welcome to this historic broadcast on CNBC Africa. I am Chris Bishop, the head of programming for the station. As usual, we'll be beaming live across 48 countries and 16 million households across Africa. But for the first time, we'll be going out on Zoom to a select audience. Good afternoon to all of you. The theme of this first online discussion will be the plight of small business. There are 5 million small and micro businesses in South Africa alone. They carry most of the country's jobs and they've borne the brunt of COVID-19. Small business, big problems was just one headline I caught in the newspaper this morning. So let's first just set the tone of the discussion with a quick look behind the small business story. It's a sobering thought as business looks to emerge from the lockdown that the future looks uncertain whichever way you look at it. Statistics South Africa says 4 in 10 businesses feel they cannot continue to operate. More than 42% said they were not confident that they had the financial resources to continue operating through the COVID-19 outbreak. And 54% indicated that they can survive without turnover, albeit only for 1 to 3 months. Many small businesses in South Africa are on shaky ground long before COVID-19. Many were struggling against high interest rates, low demand and waning confidence in the economy. The future looks even grimmer. Even if it was boom times, small businesses struggle against low margins and a paucity of capital. What is to be done to save small business? Will billionaire funds and stimulus packages be enough? What is the way forward for small business into business tomorrow? And as one of my panelists said to me last night, and this is only the beginning, how do we get to a brighter business tomorrow? The theme of the show. You can follow this discussion on social media at CNBC Africa, or you can tweet me as we go at Chris Bishop ZA. Now joining me online is the Minister for Small Business Development, Khumbudzo Ntshavheni. She's joining us here, Ben Bierman of Business Partners, the people who set up the relief fund for the Johan Rupert and his family, and Carl Kumbie, the CEO of Mercantile Bank, one of a string of banks dispersing funds to small business from the Oppenheimer Family Fund, and Olisa Ngodi, an entrepreneur at the sharp end, who among other things runs a tuk-tuk transport business here in Sandton, and also he has a farm. So starting with you, Minister, you're in Cabinet. You have been under a lot of pressure in the last few weeks to open up the economy and let business flow freely again. When is this likely to happen?
We have started to open up business for the economy, for business to start to flow. It cannot flow as easily as that because you've got economic health conditions that do not allow us to flow that irresponsibly. But the issue is that the economy has started to tick, and we have tried as much as possible to get the small business sector to become operational as quickly as possible. So that's why they're included in the regulations of those who are starting to operate within this week as we've gone to level 4 lockdown.
Just very quickly, your fellow Minister Ibrahim Patel was saying the other day it could be a matter of weeks before we're talking about dropping down the levels. How likely is that?
I would not want to speculate, but what I can say is that on our end, we are preparing to support small businesses as they have to come back to the economy, because we know the road is still going to be long for them and the journey is going to be hard. So even whether it's a matter of weeks or months, we are putting up plans and have done our bit to make sure that we extend a helping hand to small businesses and informal businesses to operate in the country.
Now, if I go to someone on the ground now, Olisa Ngodi, you run not only a farm, but also you run the tuk-tuk transport business here in Sandton. You've been taking losses since the beginning of March. How hard has it been for you on the ground?
Thank you so much, Chris. I think it's been really difficult for a small business like myself. As you correctly put, we started seeing a negative impact on our operations since the last week of February, beginning of March. So the last 5 weeks have really not been easy for us. I think what it's also done is that it's forced us, now that we started up our operations again, it's forced us to look at our business in a slightly different outlook. We also have had to obviously tweak a few things, change our model a bit as well. Obviously, these are extraordinary times, and we would have never anticipated this, and we still don't know what lies ahead. So I think at best right now is for us to hold on to our guns and operate as efficiently, given the circumstances, as possible, really.
And just to get an idea of the scale of this problem, I'm going to move to you, Ben Bierman. You have taken something like 40,000 applications for emergency funds from the Rupert family, from people asking of the Rupert family. I mean, we worked it out yesterday, that's about 500,000 jobs on the line. How terrible, desperate are some of the people who write to you at the moment?
Hi, Chris. Yeah, it's actually quite devastating. If you look at the stories and the micro stories around employees and about the business and looking at how long it's going to take them to recover, with every day that passes, I think the damage being done to small businesses are getting worse. But I think funding relief is not the only option or the only solution at this stage. I think it's also addressing the confidence levels that they have, and what we see is that the uncertainty created by the virus, and I have to salute the minister and I have to salute the government in terms of our responses as a country. But I think the challenges remain in terms of trying to look at a planning horizon and to know when relief would be available from just trying to start to operate again. That, I think, is one of the key issues that this virus has brought us, the level of uncertainty, the level of no clarity as to when can I plan to, like Kolisa said, and I have to salute him as well, because I think it's typically of an entrepreneur to start looking at alternatives and options and looking at opportunities as well. But if at least we can have some kind of a timeline to know when, and I appreciate what the minister said around not speculating about it, but a lot of the businesses that we encounter, it's about the decision about when to try and start opening again, because that will inform the extent of the damage, the extent of the relief that is required. Our program itself is structured to provide relief monthly over a 4-month period, but if there are any scenarios where this lockdown position is going to continue beyond the next 4 months, then
just
even
very
the relief
briefly,
that we're providing at this point.
Ben, if I could just jump in there. Sorry, before we go to our fourth guest, I just want to take that back to the minister there. As if you see, there was a call there, they're saying, okay, we know it's difficult, but can you not give us a timeline? Is that too much to ask, you think, Minister?
The issue is not a government, it's not a call of government. It's a call about the health situation on the ground. If you have noticed, in the last 3-4 days, the infection rate has been going high. And what are the implications of that? Yes, there have been recoveries. So we'll need to get guidance from the medical experts in terms of the reality of our situation. We know that our healthcare system will not cope if we peak too early. If we peak with it when we have flu season also on hand, our health system will not cope. So that is the balancing act. But what we have done is to allow certain businesses to operate. For instance, the mining has started to resume at 50% scaling up. Manufacturing has started to resume at 33%. They've started to resume. A number of businesses have started to resume, but they are businesses because the business model has to change. For instance, we opened up to say restaurants can take home delivery, can do online ordering and home deliveries. But in terms of the business model, it's not profitable for restaurants, majority of them, to go into the home delivery model when people cannot collect the food at home in the restaurants, when they cannot be walk-in and takeaways. So it's the balancing act that we are faced with, and that's what we are grappling with and trying to do, is to say, as the industry gets opened up, we introduce a scheme to support those industries that are opening up, to cushion as much as possible the impact that they have. But what is also fact is that it's not about money also, and it's not only about business opening, it's about supporting these businesses to change their business model. How do we handhold them? Because, for instance, we give relief for 3 months, and we approve you once, and that relief will come in for 3 months. But it's not sufficient. When you reopen, is the business going to be viable? Are the markets going to be open? Because let's use the example of Kolisa, because in the transport and hospitality industry that he plays in, the impact started in February when China closed up and everywhere else started to close up. With that impact, how do you get them to recover? How do you get the hotels or the lodges that we are responsible for to recover? And that's what we are battling with. And the likelihood of the hotels coming on stream now is very rare. So there are sectors that we already know that their likelihood, because of the high infection rate that is possible from that trading environment or operating environment, they are going to come in at the last end.
Okay.
How do we make sure
we just hold it there for now? We're going to be talking a lot of these issues in the next 20 minutes about the relief that's out there. But if I can go now to you, Carl Kumbier of Mercantile Bank. Now, you've been dispersing funds for the Oppenheimer family, among other things. But also, I just want to know the scale here. I mean, obviously, banks must be taking heavy strain at the moment. They must be looking at foreclosures. I mean, when have you ever known it worse? I mean, not even during the financial crisis of 2008, maybe.
Yeah, no, this is definitely the worst I've ever seen in my 20-odd years of banking. I think it's the COVID's one thing, but the lockdown is a catastrophe. What I call that for SMEs. I think, as you said just now in the video, those stats are exactly right. It's exactly what we're hearing as well, is that 30% of businesses say they don't receive some form of help in the next month, they're going to shut down. 50% say they don't receive help in the next 3 months, they'll shut down. So the SME sector is definitely the hardest hit. I think but another sad reality is the SME sector employs 70% of people out there. So 70% of the employed population is from SMEs. So if SMEs struggle, SMEs shut down, what happens? Unemployment goes up. So suddenly your businesses are closing, there's no demand, people can't spend money anymore, they don't have money, so it's having a huge impact there. I think from a bank point of view, we've seen this thing in 3 waves. Well, I'm sure we'll touch on some of the stuff just now. But the first wave was obviously the lockdown, and businesses obviously just run out of cash flow immediately. There's no turnover. So from a banking industry point of view, I think the banks will come to the party where we were given payment holidays on term facilities. So if you came along and showed that you were performing business at the end of February and because of lockdown you're suddenly struggling, we'll give you a 3-month payment holiday, pretty much no questions asked. So that's been our first wave. And the second wave, which I'm sure we'll talk about just now, is how do we now, when all the lockdown is lifted, like it is currently being done, how do we provide some support to those SMEs through working capital facilities just to get their businesses running? And there's obviously a lot of things that the minister's done. There's also a lot of things that the banking industry's done together with government, and I'm happy to chat about that later. And then the third wave is the long-term stuff. We'll obviously go through a recession. It's to work out from a government point of view as well as how do we pick up the economy, how do we invest heavily in infrastructure, how do we create demand out there again to stimulate businesses, and that's the long-term side of it.
And if I could just ask you one question, very short answer I need on this one, we're throwing to the next subject, is I understand that you've been involved with government, Carl, in setting up a 200 billion Rand relief fund, and you said it was set up in 2 weeks, which would have been unheard of many years ago. And I'm going to ask the minister exactly what the government's trying to do. We're moving into the section of support for business. It's amazing what people can do on the ground when the times demand.
Yes, exactly. I think it's been absolutely amazing. We work together. There are 6 representatives of the big 6 banks. And then there is South African Reserve Bank and National Treasury, and we sat around the table, everyone, and we said we had to come up with something to stimulate the economy, something to get SMEs going, something to inject liquidity into the market. And it's unbelievable when everyone's got the same goal to try and help these SMEs, what can be achieved. And what we achieved in the space of 2 to 3 weeks now, we'll be signing the agreement hopefully tomorrow. We've seen the final agreement, and a press release will probably go out tomorrow. But it's unbelievable what we managed to do in such a short space of time with all the parties involved. So I just hope going forward we can do more and more of this type of thing where business and government works together for one goal, and that is to boost the economy.
Okay, Carl, if I go back to you, Minister, now, I mean, this is all part of hundreds of billions of rands that have been pledged by the government to try to revive business. The question I have is, how sustainable is this going to be? Because it seems to me a lot of it's short term. I mean, in the last couple of hours, we heard from Edward Kieswetter, the head of SARS, and he said that there's maybe going to be 285 billion lost out of the fiscus because people aren't paying as much tax as before. And he reckons it's going to lose about between 15 and 20% of the tax take because of this COVID-19 thing. How's the government going to sustain from coffers trying to support business?
I think the coffers are not an option. They are an option only as a temporary relief. What is an option is to say, how do we create demand in the economy? How do we stimulate that demand? And how do we make sure that that demand can then start to feed off, to benefit small businesses? What we have insisted on, for instance, on our part, is to say all the work that is being done, that government participates in, whether we are doing PPEs, personal protective equipment, or whatever else that has to be done, SMMEs must participate, including the micro businesses. And what we have also realized is to say, how do we make sure that South Africans or Africans in general, we can start to buy from within Africa? How do we make sure that we supply and consume that within here? Because if we can consume what we are producing, at least we are creating local demand and we are boosting the economy. I think the lockdown has helped in building self-sufficiency. And if we can maximize on our ability to self-sustain and keep the money circulating within our economy, whether in the continent or within South Africa, it's neither here nor there, but we must keep it within here to grow our economies. That's one. Because when you do that, you create opportunities for employment for small businesses. Let me give you an example. We did a spaza shop support scheme. We insisted that in that basket of goods that spaza shops must buy, they must buy products from SMMEs. And we have been able to link 200 SMMEs to wholesalers who were not previously supplying wholesalers, that they're now supplying their products to wholesalers, and those products are sold in spaza shops in South Africa. And with that scheme, you're starting to create an economy that is self-reliant. And those people have now created at least another 2,000 jobs because we have been able to support them. And our focus is that to say, when you get them to participate, how many jobs are we creating? How many jobs are we preserving? But what has become a challenge now, even with the billions of rands that government has put aside, we have noticed that our own funding is not sufficient. The UIF, small businesses are not applying for the UIF, mostly because they were not complying. We have now made an arrangement with the UIF to say, can you allow them to accept a commitment or that they will pay and honor their debts and pay them, so that you alleviate that pressure. But when we do that, we are prioritizing those sectors that are opening up, but meshed to that is creating them opportunities to do their businesses.
Now, if I could put that straight back to Olisa, the man who's out there on the streets of Sandton in his working day. I know that you've applied for support funds, but you haven't found it that easy.
Absolutely, Chris. I think straight off the onset, we were quick out of the marks to apply for all of some of the relief aid that government had put out there. But unfortunately, as soon as we put on our applications, we really haven't seen any positive responses from the various aids that we have applied for. I think I'll give you a good example off the back of what Minister have just said with the UIF. We've also put through our application there, but we haven't seen any joy. In actual fact, we're getting different responses every other week, and we're not really getting anywhere there. So it makes it difficult for us to even plan ahead and forecast our operations, because the help that's supposedly there is not really coming to the fore. I can even give you an example of the of the SMME relief fund. As soon as they went live, we put through our application. We are yet to receive any positive response from them. In actual fact, we have not received any acknowledgements from them. And I know for a fact that I think I'm speaking not only for myself, but on behalf of many SMMEs. I know for a fact that they're also going through the same trouble. So, it doesn't make the situation any easier. In actual fact, I think it further exacerbates the whole situation for us. And obviously, as I said, it makes it very difficult for you to forecast your business and plan accordingly, given the circumstances that we find ourselves in right now.
So if I go to you now, Ben, I know you're involved in the Rupert Fund, arranging it. One of the things that I understand that's your view is that maybe we should relax who gets the funds. I mean, some of these funds are asking for tax compliance certificates, and you're saying that in these difficult times, perhaps we should waive such things.
Yeah, Chris, it's
Oh, we've got a bit of
and ensure that the relief that is available, the relief that is available actually flows through to the right beneficiary. So, in hindsight, if we think back about the design of our program, we did have a criteria, and you've got to remember that we're in a lockdown position at that point in time. So you receive 30 to 40,000 applications. How do you wade through them and identify the businesses such as Colissa's that really needs to get a capital injection, to get some working capital to ensure that they continue paying their employees? And one of the criteria we came up with was to provide some kind of evidence that you're tax compliant. A tax compliant business, I think it tells a lot about a business in terms of paying VAT, paying their income tax. And as a criteria, we found in this first wave that we assessed that a lot of businesses were disqualified because there was no evidence of any tax compliance whatsoever. But you recognize that if you look through at the business, you look at the employees, you look at the activities and the economic value that they're adding, that you would have wanted an opportunity in a lockdown situation. It's limited in terms of assessing good quality businesses, understanding the tax compliance or the reason for not being tax compliant, and still providing some kind of assistance. But it's about recognizing how far the damage is spreading and how difficult it is for SMEs to survive. That causes you to rethink what sort of criteria should you be coming up with. In a level 4, a stage 4 scenario where there's a bit more movement, I think we can look at other criteria potentially. But at this stage, most of the applications that we've rejected was entirely because there was no clear evidence that it was a viable business. And we actually put a cutoff call at December. So we wanted to see evidence that it was a viable business, that it was solvent, so that assets are more than the liabilities, at December 2019. And that would have passed the hurdle for us to then consider providing assistance to that business. But in hindsight, if you look at the damage that's been caused, I wish we could have come up with criteria that could include the deserving businesses without requiring that level of evidence or proof that they are in fact tax compliant.
So, Minister, you're listening to some of this reaction. You said yourself, when I asked you the question, that what government's put up so far isn't really going to be enough. What more can the state do to help its people in these difficult days?
I think it's not what the state can do, it's what all of us can do. The private sector must come to the party, and indeed they're coming to the party, including the financial sector. But what we need to do is the issue that Ben is talking about. In terms of the criteria, for instance, we have a requirement for tax compliance, but not the way Ben, they are using them from the business partner's perspective. Our requirement is to say, if you owe SARS, go and do an acknowledgement of debt with SARS, and you're good enough for us. And you must have been registered with that, and we'll help you to comply. But the issue that we sit with, Ben is sitting with over 40,000 applications. I'm sitting with over 100,000 applications. Somebody's sitting with another number. But if we could then share and say, in the 40,000 you're sitting with, how many of them are duplication of what I'm sitting with, what the UIF is sitting, what everybody else is sitting with, so that we can say, take care of these 20,000, I'll take care of another 20, another one. We share that load so that we don't have, the money can spread further, because that's what we need to do. We need to avoid double dipping, and we need to start to share notes and compare notes. We are doing that at government. What Crowley has raised is correct. When we took off, everybody had not planned for this. The capacity was not good enough. So that we have had teething problems. For instance, we started to move our first 100 million, I think, on week 3 after the scheme was launched, when we thought we'll move it within that same week. We have learned, we're improving, we're not yet there perfectly. We are working to assist also with the UIF on how do we make sure that they can get off the blocks quick and fast enough. And that's the things that we keep on doing, but we also need to share notes across. For instance, ourselves and business partners, we sit also in the same stable. We are shareholders in business partners. So we'll at home, when we go back, we'll have to share notes and clean up our linkages and our tying up, because those applications, what is good is that they came in automated form. So we can be able to sift quickly and say who has applied where, and then so that it goes further. But the second part is to say, it's not about the COVID, the lockdown period. Is that when we resume business, what are we putting in place to get this business to operate?
Okay, well, let's ask a little bit more here. Now, Carl, I want to bring you back into the conversation here. One other thing, we've been talking to a lot of small businesses in this very studio over the last couple of months. Now, one thing people say about these stimulus and these rescue packages is that, I mean, you were saying last night about the one for the Oppenheimers, that it's interest-free, you pay it back in 5 years, but it's still debt, it's still going to pile up. And if one thing this country's got too much of right now, it's debt.
Yeah, I suppose that's an unfortunate reality of South Africa. So we don't have, the government hasn't got the money just to give grants to millions of businesses out there. So we've got to come up with, I suppose, other ideas. And the Oppenheimer is a very easy scheme. It's to pay salaries and wages. They entrust the banks, the 6 banks registered with a scheme where you basically will pay the salaries on behalf of the employees over a 15-week period. And then it becomes a loan, and you only have to pay it back in 5 years interest-free. So that's a very simple one. So for those businesses out there that are looking to pay their salaries and wages and they want to be able to borrow money interest-free, that's one scheme. There is still some funds available in that. And there's little friction in the process, so it's easy to do. But I think it's the whole guarantee scheme. I think that's the big one that's hopefully going to stimulate the economy. I mean, the economy works on the principle of, I pay you, then you pay the next person, you pay your salaries and wages. But at the moment, there is no liquidity in the market. No one's paying anyone. So you speak to anyone with their own business, I'll tell you their debtors aren't paying them, so they can't pay their creditors, they can't pay their staff. So the whole idea behind this guarantee scheme that we've come up with now, we're together with government, is to be able to inject liquidity into the market. So the Reserve Bank's actually going to give the banking industry lend us 100 billion rand to start. It's eventually going to go to 200 billion if the scheme works. We'll then take that 100 billion rand amongst all the banks, and we'll lend it to SMEs to pay operational costs for the next 3 months. So you've got to just be able to show, also remove the friction. The tax issue came up as well. We just said, no, we said, as long as you register the tax, but to prove tax compliance just adds another step in the process, take too long. So let's make it as simple as possible as well. So any SME, when the scheme is launched, hopefully tomorrow, you'll be able to go to your bank, you say you want to be part of this COVID loan scheme. We'll then assess it, we'll give you the certain criteria you've got to meet. So you have turnover less than 300 million. That's only to fund operational costs for a 3-month basis. But then what you do is we pay you out over 3 months to pay your operational costs, hopefully get your business going. You pay your suppliers, are going for stock. They can pay salaries and wages, etc. And then what happens is you have interest capital roll up for 3 months. You don't pay anything back for the first 6 months. And then it's you pay it off over the next 5 years. So hopefully your business has generated enough revenue over this period to be able to become profitable and earn enough cash flow to be able to repay the loan over the next 5 years. So the whole idea is to save businesses by providing them with a loan, and the loan is at prime, and the interest rates are very low at the moment, 7.75 at prime. So I think it's a fantastic initiative to get money out into the system, and hopefully businesses will go to the banks, borrow through the scheme, and then get their businesses up and running again. Sure.
If I can go back to Olisa now on the ground. I mean, sure, all of these stimulus funds and chance to sort of save business, it's all better than nothing for people like you. You employ about 60 people, I understand, on the ground. But a lot of people are also talking about payment holidays from the banks and financial institutions. But just tell me, in 3 months' time, you're still going to be facing a huge debt that you're going to struggle to pay off.
Absolutely, and I think I'm more concerned about the fact that, with all of these relief aids that are out there, for all SMMEs and entrepreneurs, I think at this point in time, it's all good and well to have them on offer, but I think not enough is being done right now to address the immediate concerns and frustrations of the entrepreneurs. We've just come out of a business like ours, have gone through 5 weeks of absolute frustration because our business obviously wasn't operating. And obviously, having said that, our efforts of approaching the UIF, the SME Relief Fund, those have not borne any fruit really. So I'm quite concerned that we're still going to have entrepreneurs sitting at home not doing anything because some of these relief measures are hard to come by really. That obviously puts strain on their planning. We can't even forecast anything that is tangible, and so that is an issue. Some of the criteria, speaking to the criteria, I think a lot has been said about that. The criteria, there's quite a bit of red tape as all around there. It's a bit stringent at this point in time for a lot of the smaller guys that don't even have access to any of these resources. So with SMMEs being the backbone of the economy, I think a lot more can be done from a private and public sector point of view. I think a more robust collaborative effort could really assist us in navigating the nuances of these times, really, or these aids that are out there.
Sure. I mean, one thing, I can go back to you, Minister. I mean, interviewed scores of young entrepreneurs, emergent entrepreneurs in this very studio the last couple of months. And one of the things they say in this survival process, and also helping them to build wealth and jobs, is that if the government had an aggressive policy of procuring from small businesses and maybe not taking sometimes the easy option, going to a big business, then the prospects would be a lot better.
Indeed, we've become very aggressive. You'll recall that the president in February, when he did the State of the Nation address, he committed that we are working on 1,000 products that we said they must be procured from SMEs, whether by government or by everybody. We must get them to procure by SMEs, and we've got a very good support from the private sector, big business in that area, and some of them have been getting SMEs outsourcing their production to SMEs through that process. We finalized the list of the 1,000 products, but we then also said, what are the services that we must get strictly from SMEs? And we're having that engagement. Unfortunately, the lockdown came when the public consultation process has to take place. But through the work that we've been doing with the COVID-19, we have started to test the ability of SMEs to produce and to deliver those services in the areas that we have targeted, and whether they'll have capacity or volumes. But because it's not only about them supplying, it's also about us providing the necessary support behind them to make their production process efficient, to make their pricing right, to make them competitive generally, because you can't just say they must come from SMEs if they're not competitive. So I think for me, it has given us an opportunity to fine-tune some of the things that we've been planning under conditions that were a bit more manageable, though difficult for SMEs. But going back to the issue that has been raised about the relief. Relief is only for the period of lockdown. What we are looking at now is this: how do we get the money, not only the money, but the support out there for businesses as they come back to operate? The National Credit Guarantee Scheme is very critical, and the fact that it's reserved for SMEs. The worry that we have as a department is that at a threshold of 300 million rands is still, for us, some of them are still very big business. So we have been engaging with National Treasury to say, how do we make sure that the very small, the Xolisa type of business will benefit from that National Guarantee Scheme? How do we link them to the Kula Credit Guarantee Scheme that government runs and other credit guarantee schemes that government runs? How do we make sure they are accessible to the most ordinary and micro businesses? Because the micro and the very small businesses are the ones that are bleeding the most. So that's the conversation we're having with Treasury.
Okay.
And in that conversation, we're starting to say it's not enough to just say we're putting money. What is the market that we are creating for them? And that is where we are.
Okay, Ben, if I can come back to you. You've been dealing with a lot of these SMEs with the work you've been doing with the Rupert family. Now, is this what you're hearing? Are you hearing that the government is looking to try to do more for small and medium enterprise businesses?
Yes, I need to support what the Minister has said there, in the sense that the SME sector has got lots of nuances and niches to it, and a one-size-fits-all type of approach can't address all the needs that we see out there. The bank guarantees, or the guarantee scheme that Carl and the banks have come up with, I think will increase the velocity of money in the economy. And to the Minister's earlier point, we need to ensure that there's alignment between the different initiatives so that a specific entrepreneur doesn't benefit too much from all the relief efforts, and a company like Xolisa's can't get access to the funding. So, Minister, undertaking from me to ensure that we coordinate our efforts with the initiatives that government is running, but to the extent that you have to have an approach that is unique, with a unique platform for the very small enterprises, the survivalist businesses. But Chris, on a negative note, I think we need to recognize what we're facing as a country, globally, and that there will be damage that will be irrecoverable from, in the sense that we need to start looking forward as well to the post-COVID-19 scenarios, and imagine for ourselves a world where the new type of businesses will survive, because some businesses, unfortunately, it's a reality, they will not survive this period. They were marginal even before the COVID-19 hit us. But what we need to do is to work with government and look at what sort of ecosystem needs to be created to sustain SMEs, to stimulate the growth, to create the demand that the minister was talking about, so that we pick up those businesses post-COVID-19 quickly and make sure that we can get demand and economic growth going as quickly as possible, increase the employment numbers. And there are industries in the South African context that I think will survive this and will start thriving beyond COVID-19. And one of the benefits that I see, and one has to look hard to find the benefits, is the fact that this crisis has brought us all together, I think, in a much closer way, and that there's much more opportunity and willingness to see how private sector and government can align the interests, number one, look at our industries like our businesses and ensure that we do the right things right now to ensure that we put our economy on a new growth path, on a new trajectory, to ensure that it's more sustainable into the future. Because we shouldn't forget that we were facing a whole lot of challenges even before COVID-19. The government fiscal position and the fiscal headroom is quite constrained, as the minister said. So we all need to work together to see what can we do to unlock the innovation and the creativity in South African businesses, and start creating an economy that can be more inclusive for all.
Sorry, so before we circle back to the minister again to find out what policy is going to be in the long term, that's one thing that, Carl, you mentioned to me last night, though, that out of all of this has come a heck of a lot of cooperation in all sectors, private and government. But everyone's talking, and what I want to discuss in the last second, everyone's saying business will never be the same again. Business is going to change beyond all recognition. From your banking perspective, how are you seeing that develop?
Yeah, I think it's like anything. I think it's listening to everything now about business being paid earlier as opposed to later. Yeah, I think like a crisis like this stimulates a bit of action, I think. Yeah, and suddenly it'll force people to do certain things they wouldn't have maybe done in the past. So maybe we're going to start forcing large corporates now pay your SMEs on time, etc. But also, I think it's forced a lot of implementation of technology earlier than we would have done. If it wasn't for the COVID-19 virus. So let's use a simple example. As Mercantile, we're part of the Capitec group, and we managed to, in the space of about 1 or 2 weeks, move a call center with 1,400 agents from the call center, one building. They're all working from home. So everyone got a laptop, everyone's connected via technology, everyone's sitting out at home. It's working, and it's working fantastically well. Would we have done that if it wasn't for the virus? No chance. Now at least we piloted and said, wow, this thing works. I mean, we're having this Zoom meeting now where people from around the country, streaming live, I suppose, and you say to yourself, how many more people are going to be using this technology going forward? So I think a lot of businesses are going to adapt the way they operate. A lot of businesses are going to cut costs by not having to travel so much anymore because you can use this type of technology. So I think sometimes there's always a little bit of good, I suppose, that comes out of a crisis, and it's I think it's the businesses that make the most of it. Now they're going to survive for the next couple of months and hopefully long into the future.
Well, I could go around now. We're getting to the point in the show before we go to questions from the people who've assembled online. We're getting to the point in the show now where we're trying to look forward to see what is possible, where now. And I say one word to you, Minister: industrialization. It's often thrown around in political speeches. I've often doubted whether enough is being done to get people out there making the nuts and bolts. They're going to get export dollars for South Africa.
Yeah, industrialization is quite possible. What I've noticed during this period, and we've shared with Cabinet, is say the ability of South Africans across the color line, across the gender line, and across age to be resilient. It's very amazing. Even during this period when we started to say, who are the SMMEs that will support in terms of food security? Who do we support? Where do we look for? They came up in numbers and they were quite creative. When we said, but the factories are not open, they creatively said to us, this is what you can do to get the factories to operate and do that. So at a policy level, I think government, it has been proven to government through this disaster that we can make policies that are very efficient and effective for government to deliver. I can tell you within the first 2 weeks, as a government department, we were able to deliver those things that we could not deliver in the last 5 years. And for me, it was amazing. But also, we have also been able to examine what are the policies that work and do not work to enable certain things to happen. All of a sudden now, we've got what we call artisanal businesses that are ready to act in the public infrastructure rollout plan, they've been preparing themselves not only to tender, but they've been saying, these are the problems, this is what we're going to fix. In this hospital, there's this challenge and we're going to fix it. Without anybody even contracting them. And they said, we are doing our donations. And we asked the Department of Health, why can't then these people be used? Why do you want to go into a tender of a multiple millions of rands when these people are available? So South Africa and Africa can industrialize quicker, and we can consume what we have produced, but we can also service ourselves efficiently, more profitably, if we rely on our own resources. And government policy can be flexible and have the flexibility. Where I'm sitting, I'm saying the parliamentary process of changing the laws and regulations need to be reviewed to make them a bit faster and quicker, because it can take us 6 to 8 months to get the public procurement bill in place, which will enable the payment of SMMEs on time, the procurement of goods from SMMEs quicker and more effectively, not only by government, but across all of us, but which will also allow South Africans to participate in the economy, not only as consumers, but as producers for this economy.
Well, I tell you, Minister,
it has also enabled us to say, what is the potential across our provinces? And what can the private sector bring to the party? We've worked with some multinationals when we wanted technology to do the call center moving from home.
Well, Minister, I'm going to have to cut you there. I'm sorry, because basically there's questions coming in for you, and I want to keep you there online. So there's a person here by the name of Mfundo Tango of Mpilo Ende, 45 Food. He says, are the applications for debt relief finance assistance administered by your office? And if so, do you have stats, the amounts distributed per province? Because it's strange that the allocated budget has already been exhausted, yet some of the applications did not receive any acknowledgement of their application. Quick answer to that one, please.
We have stats that being allocated through CIFA, our funding agency. We've got statistics. We have had hitches in terms of the feedback, but what we have opted to do, because we are looking for more money so that we can fund more. We're not wanting to reject a whole lot of people. So we have kept the first round, the first window open, and the applications that have come in open. And we are trying to give feedback as much as possible. We have already adjudicated almost 350 million rands to date out of the 530 million rands. And they've been in contact with those people. I think there are others, the disbursements have started to go. We've got the statistics per province, and we should be able to share the statistics per province.
Another quick question for you. Somebody called KP Timel. I think I know the person, he makes face masks. He says he's been trying to contact your office before lockdown to help to get funding. He said he hasn't got anything back. Where else can he go?
But my office does not do funding. Funding is done through CIFA. So when you contact my office, there's going to be a problem. We contact CIFA, and we've been publishing that contact CIFA or CEDA if you need assistance. But you go to our website, www.dsbd.gov.za and www.cifa.org.za. You'll get information. If you're doing face masks, we even have an RFI, which we want all of you to respond to that, because we are supplying the database to National Treasury and Department of Health for procurement of personal protective equipment.
Okay, well, just while the other questions are coming in, I'll just go back to our panel now. We're looking to the future to see exactly what's going to come out of all of this and what kind of jobs are going to come out of it. Now, Lisa, I know you've been looking into it on the ground. What are you seeing, any signs of twitching of recovery in the economy?
Thanks, Chris. I think more than anything else, I think we've spoken about the doom and gloom this whole entire pandemic has brought to the SMME sector. But I think we should remain optimistic. I think what the positive thing that it's really done is force one to really think outside of the box. Force one to put in measures that are going to enable them to diversify their businesses. And I think doing that adequately and putting the right and correct measures in place, one is able to at least make it through this period. We know for a fact that most businesses are not going to make it. That's a reality of the matter. But I think one has to adapt and make sure that they really survive this new normal, if you will. persevere and remain optimistic.
And if I could come to you, Ben, now, I mean, we're talking about new jobs. I was just reading, I don't know who writes these things, 75 new jobs that will come out, and one of them was mentioned setting up an editorial business. He said it doesn't cost you anything and you can make money very, very quickly. I know a lot of journalists walk in the streets now who disagree with you, but essentially, what new jobs do you see coming out of this economy that's going to be unrecognizable when we come out of COVID-19?
Because I think the first thing we need to recognize is that this whole lockdown and the working from home dynamic is unlocking a lot of opportunity for technology businesses. One knows the story about Zoom, the technology we're using at the moment. And as we identify the opportunities in terms of a changing of the operating model, in terms of how companies, Carl mentioned how he's moved his call center into a home. Same happened with us at Business Partners. We've got 240 employees and we've managed to do more in the last month than in previous years, and nobody came to the office. So out of that stimulus or that change or that impact on the fabric of what we see, you'll see opportunities either in investing in technology, funding that investment, or developing new technologies that actually supports the new way that we anticipate doing business. But this flip side of the coin, obviously, is that some of the industries that are dependent on international tourists, that are dependent on drivers that we don't know when they will start being reactivated, depending on the length of the crisis, those are the ones that we are particularly concerned about. But I think to be a knowledge worker and have portability to your service in terms of where you can provide it from and mobility, that is a huge opportunity because I think it will be wider accepted. You would be able to provide your service and product without necessarily being in a physical dimension. The whole transport of goods and services to have more internet commerce, I think it's going to boom dramatically, especially in a South African context. We still have these mega shopping malls, and it's nice to go to a shopping mall to go and procure whatever you want. But I think we're going to see a permanent shift to more home delivery type of businesses. But the opportunities will be there. I think at this stage, we all keep our heads down and see if we can just get through the crisis. But as we unlock those opportunities, I think we can then look at a new stimulus for growth across the SME sector.
Carl, if I can go back to you, there's a specific question here for the SAFT fund, which is the one that you're helping the Oppenheimer family with. And what they're saying is that what they're saying basically is that it does not provide for an opt-out, which is needed once TERS payments are made or ever. It says here that employees will be double dipping at the employer's expense. What do you say to that?
I don't understand. Were you saying they're going to claim the IF and get get paid?
That's what he's saying basically. He's saying that there's no opt-out in it.
Yeah, I suppose, well, that's the employer that's the decision they're going to make. It's their staff. So that is capped there, 750 Rand per week per employee. So that's what you can claim through the fund. So if that happens, I mean, you're always going to have maybe one or two people that are, I suppose, jipping the system, but it's not intended. It's intended for, you need to be able to keep your staff so that when you do open up your factory again or your little business in a month or two's time, that you've got your staff still with you and you can carry on going, and at least your staff can try and support a family at home. So I think, so it's if that happens, it's unfortunate reality. These type of things could happen.
Okay, and I've got one for the minister now here. It's very close to my heart. Someone asked here that media businesses have come under a lot of pressure. Some of them have closed down. They're seen as an essential services. As you know, all along through this crisis, we've been broadcasting essential services. But on the other hand, there seems to be very little support for media. What more can the government do to try to help media companies?
I think it's the issue, it goes back to the issue of creativity. It depends on how creative we are. For instance, we are now broadcasting on CNBC Africa, and you're continuing to earn some revenue through that. I think the media industry must come to the part in terms of doing creativity. It's not only them, but also just the entertainment, media and entertainment sector must then start to be creative. They are our creatives in any case. They must start to creatively come to the party, because the businesses that are going to be surviving are the businesses that are going to seize the opportunity of technology and operate in that space, including the media. They must move into that technology. When I'm talking to you now, I was asking myself how many media houses or media or platform, including websites that can, on a daily basis or even on an hourly basis, give me reliable statistics of what's happening about small businesses in the country. There's no such. And why can't the journalists go in that space? They have the investigative ability, they've got the network, they can do that, they can consolidate that information and make it available live, which we can go to. And even if they say we must subscribe, let's subscribe. I'm just giving that as an example.
But if I could assure you, Minister, a lot of people in the private media as well, they unfortunately in this difficult time, we're not making money and essentially need some support.
Everyone needs support, that's true. But we also must come to the part in terms of saying, I want support, this is what I'm doing. Because like I said earlier, the money for relief where we say we want to help you maintain your staff, it's not there for everybody. There's not basket load. But I'm sure the Minister of Communications, Acting Minister of Communications, is working on a package to support the media and through the MDDA. But on our part, we're saying everyone who needs to come to the party, let's come to the party, let's support you at a business level. Because I've had journalists who say to me, we are freelancers, give us money for support. I said, no, come to me and say you are a business, you want support for XYZ in your business. We can then have a conversation, because that's a different issue. In terms of relief, it's available for every business that is there. You apply for the relief and you qualify for the relief, and we'll support as much as we can in that relief.
Okay, and I have one for you, Ben, as well, from someone here who's applied for relief from the funds you've been doing. He says that he believes that the criteria that you've asked for is a little bit cumbersome.
I wouldn't entirely disagree with that, Chris. I think we had to come up with a set of criteria, as I mentioned earlier, to try and identify the deserving, the viable businesses. We had two platforms. The one platform, I would argue, was not cumbersome at all. It included any sole proprietor. So some of the media staff could have applied there and said, this is my business, this is what I do, I freelance. It was purely a form of a grant, but it would have provided some kind of relief. To the extent that we did engage with most of the 2,300 clients that applied to the more up to R1 million package, that could have been cumbersome to the extent that we asked some tough questions, we asked some penetrating questions, and we did sign agreements with them. But most of that has been completed. We're opening up our platform now for a second wave because we haven't placed the full 1 billion. But it should get easier as we go into a more clear future and there's more mobility. In a lockdown period, Chris, it was quite difficult to say, how do we get the SME entrepreneur to provide us with information? Not all of them had the ability to scan or take pictures and send it with a cell phone and submit it to an internet connection. So in hindsight, it was the only channel available to us. We couldn't receive them via post or with physical walk-ins because we were in lockdown. So to the extent that we had to rely on the technology that was at that stage available, the channels that were available, it did, again, and I know this, eliminate some of the entrepreneurs that might not have had ready access to the internet to get onto the platform. We were surprised by the representativity of the businesses. So as a rule, I think they did manage to find access to the kind of communication channels that we made available to them. But okay, at this stage, I think in the second wave that we're going to be facilitating, a lot of the criteria have been relaxed. A lot of the criteria have been refined. So I'm anticipating it to improve as we continue.
Okay. Just one more another quick question for the Minister. They're still coming thick and fast, by the way. We're trying to filter them down. But this is from Rufus Ramotobele to the Minister. He says, our Council of Black Insurance Advisors, group of independent financial advisors advising on insurance, our challenge is they don't know where to claim still. What should they be doing?
They're in the insurance advisory service.
Yes.
They are in the financial. They are in the financial sector. So what our arrangement is that those who are participating in the financial sector should be able to be sorted through the National Credit Guarantee Scheme easier, because they know how the sector operates and they know how to sort themselves up. That's why we've pushed. And the confirmation has been made that the scheme will be launched within this week, if not tomorrow, to make available so that they can go and ask for assistance through there.
Well, as the last questions come through, we've been through a lot of the harsh realities in this show. I want to start just going around each of the panelists, starting with you, Olisa. Just exactly a little bit of hope that we could take from this. Everyone's under a lot of pressure at the moment. Business is under a lot of pressure at the moment. But where do you see the emergence into a better business tomorrow?
Look, I think, Chris, the first thing that we need to acknowledge is the fact that we're living in extraordinary times at this point in time. I think we need to get used to this.
Yeah, we can.
Life is not going to be as what it was pre-COVID-19, and I think obviously going forward, I think with the measures that government and the other key stakeholders have put into place. I think it's important that we try to, as entrepreneurs, obviously allow those efforts to play themselves out. I think this is the first time for everybody, but also I think, as I mentioned previously before, I think a collaborative effort between public and the private sector would also put us in good stead in as far as overcoming the situation. A lot of SMEs are not going to go back to operating again, and those that are fortunate enough, just like ourselves, who have survived this 5 weeks, these are uncertain times. We also have to come to terms with that. But more than anything else, I think we need to remain optimistic. And I think, as I also said earlier on, looking at things through a different lens, tweaking your models, and just doing things slightly different to what we've been used to. I think we will at some point get through this.
Minister, I've got another question for you, and I am coming back to you towards the end of the show for your feeling of hope that you can leave us with. But for now, someone's saying that, quite interestingly enough, couldn't the government consider a mixed way of funding small businesses, like a mixture of debt, grant, and equity? What about that?
So on the grant we have done we continue to do for the informal businesses, the grant debt mix. And also for when we come into, we are launching a business viability scheme, which we're going to partner with the private sector on, which mixes, and we use the blended finance model. We mix both grant, debt, but also equity, because our view is that those businesses with the strongest chance for survival, if we can take equity on them, we should be able to get them to remain in the business and stay stronger. And we are partnering with the accounting and financial services firms to come and help that part, because as a government is not in our strongest space to give equity support in a business or what you call a dedicated post-funding support. So we want to partner with the private sector, and will prefer small-scale financial services firms to come into the party to help us manage those businesses until they're stable enough.
And one other quick one here. Someone's saying, what about those businesses that have contracts with government for supply and delivery, but they're not registered for UIF because they only get jobs if and when required by government? What can you do for them?
But this is what we need to clarify. With the requirement, if you were not registered for UIF, you must go now and register for UIF, and then you claim the benefit from UIF. You will then sign a commitment that you will honor your debt to the UIF when your business is stable. And that arrangement and agreement is reached with the UIF, fully aware by our side that some businesses may not survive, but will need to hold their hands to give them a chance of survival. If they cannot survive, government will have to make a plan of making sure that debt is written off. But we have said, everyone, what is a requirement is that go and register for UIF and for SARS and acknowledge your debt on UIF and SARS. They will not pay you for the past, but now we have agreed with UIF that they should pay you for your employees for the period of 3 months and 4 months that is applicable. And when your business comes into operation and is stable, you'll start to repay that debt.
Okay, Minister, we'll take the pressure off you for a minute and we'll go to the banks now. I think perhaps, Carl, you could take this one. Now, someone asks here by the name of Jemima Nyeri. Now, in terms of support being challenged through the retail banks, we approached our bank for funding under this category, but there seems to be no conclusive process for applications. The banks indicate that forms and requirements will only be available, so when should we expect the process to start?
Yeah, so the process for the big guarantee scheme I spoke about earlier will hopefully start tomorrow, or it will start, from the 11th, I think it's next Monday. So the agreements will be signed this week. So how it'll work is whoever your transactional bank account is with, or whether you have a borrowing relationship, go to that bank, right? So one of the big six, and then go to the bank and apply for the COVID loan, and it'll follow a certain process. So that'll all happen in the next week.
Okay, all right. So I'm moving through you all now. I'll go to you next, Ben. This new economy that people aren't going to recognise when we emerge from lockdown. What's it going to entail? What is going to give us hope that it's going to be a better business tomorrow?
Chris, I believe that South Africans are uniquely resilient. And I think we've seen evidence over the last 3 to 4 weeks about how we can face a true crisis and how we align behind it and then overcome we've got to sort of peek into the abyss about what sort of future holds for us. And then we turn around, we forget our differences, and we unite behind a common initiative. And I do believe that as we progress through this crisis, that we're going to reset the basic fabric of our economic environment to become more inclusive, to create a strong, thriving SME industry that is driving the assets and the attributes that we have as a country, and benefits from those. I think a lot of the initiatives and the reaching out from the minister and from the different government departments, and we need to remember that if I compare how our government has reacted to this crisis, it's easy to criticize anything, but if you do a comparison to, for instance, a first world country like the United States, I think our government needs to be recognized for how we've been led in this crisis. Not everything is perfect, but the intention, the alignment, and the energy behind trying to make sure that a better South Africa comes out after COVID-19, I think is clearly evident. And what we need all the SMEs to do is to get their affairs in order, to see how they can benefit from some of the relief programs, the massive amounts of money that is being made available, and then see how we can actually get our businesses stronger and better and focused on this new economy, as you mentioned, which will be dominated by some of the classic industries. I think tourism will revive again, and we've got so many assets in our country that the whole tourism industry, the information technology industry, and some of the innovations that we're already seeing coming out will thrive in the post-COVID-19 world. So we have the assets, the capability, the energy, the people in our country to make sure that South Africa will survive this. And if we just think about how we've moved closer to each other, I think that should be a lasting legacy of the COVID-19. In a world where social distancing is required, we've actually made progress in coming together more as a nation, in my view.
Okay, and I have one last small question for you, Minister. Someone says that they they got their acknowledgement a week ago that they were going to be helped. He just wants to know on behalf of everybody, how long does it take for the money to actually arrive, roughly?
The commitments we made, unfortunately, we are behind. So we are hoping the batches that were approved last week, they should have their money within this week or next week at the most. And that's what we have been pushing for. And we do that as we are sourcing more money to make it available for the next round that has been there, so that we can close the window and get to the next window in terms of relief. And also the ones that are there, because we are now starting to sift the ones that are applying for payroll assistance, we are sifting them through to the UIF without them not necessarily applying anew at the UIF and getting them prioritized at the other side using the timelines they've applied on our part.
Okay, and just while you're still on screen with us, Minister, I'm going to ask you for your final comment that gives us all a bit of hope in these difficult days of lockdown.
So many small businesses are not going to survive the lockdown. are not going to survive COVID-19. But many new small businesses are going to rise and emerge from this crisis. And those who are innovative currently are going to also survive this period. But that will redefine how our economy is structured and how our competitiveness as a nation is structured. One thing for sure, South Africa survives, they thrive better under pressure. And I think every time we could be put in a pressure jar, and then we'll do well. Where we are focusing ourselves is to say, how do we make sure that when this new economy survives, women are participating, young people are participating, and also the previously disadvantaged are participating? How do we make sure that townships and rural economies can stand on their own? How do we make sure that proudly South African products are on our shelves and dominate our shelves than the imports? But also for us, what is a reality is that we were talking about the fourth industrial revolution last year. In fact, early this year as a country, we could not even define it properly, agreeing on what is that definition. But today we found ourselves right bang in the middle of the fourth industrial revolution. And it's not time to turn back. It's time for us to maximize e-commerce, to use the use of technology, but to make our businesses more efficient. And our responsibility as government is to give South Africans a place to go to. So we're saying, if you need support in terms of general business support, go to ceda.org.za. They will help you with business support. If you go funding, go to CIFA. We've got a very good network with the banks equally, but also with other partners, DFIs and other partners like your business partners and all. We can link you up. But for us, what is also primary is that we must strengthen and improve the collaborative relationship between government and private sector. We are doing well, but there is room for improvement to make sure that we can extend this pie to reach as many more people. Thank you.
Okay, Minister, and just before I let you go, there's one last question, which should be a simple yes or no answer. Young lady's asking, on your website, it says applications are closed for RFI for cloth masks. The period's over according to your website. Are you still open to small businesses making submissions? Yes or no?
Yes, it's extended to the 31st of May.
Oh, there you are. Simple, straightforward answer. Thank you very much, Minister. And if I go to you, Carl, now, in the banking world, what gives you hope in the strange new world we face in business tomorrow?
Yeah, I think we've got to build confidence. I think that's the first thing to get this country going again. And I think that everyone has to work together, whether it's government, public, the private sector. Everyone has to work together with one common goal. And that only goal is to grow this economy. Yeah, and we've got to work together to say we've already shown we can do it. So hopefully this crisis puts us all together a bit closer and we go out there and achieve it. I think we got to look at the sectors where we can create lots of jobs. I mean, Ben's mentioned that tourism will pick up in a year or two's time again. So are we geared up to be able to handle the tourism? With a weak rand, it must be a very good destination for people around the world to come and visit our beautiful country. And I think the bigger one is for sure technology, e-commerce, all that. We will, but we really, this country's great at technology, so I'm sure we'll do well there. But manufacturing, I still don't understand how we import so many goods here from China. Hopefully, this crisis has brought people to become much more loyal and much more towards South African products, and how do we as government provide tax breaks and things for companies to set up big textile factories again, continue with the automotive sector and get manufacturing going. Now, I've always said I cannot understand how iron ore gets out of the ground, goes all the way to China, gets produced into a coil, and the ship comes back here and sells the coil to South African businesses. We should be doing all of that here on our own shores.
And one last question for you, Carl, before I let you go, is someone's just put in here, what was the rationale for charging an interest rate equal to prime when we are not being charged additional fees for these fundings from the financial institutions as they make the rates even higher? What do you say to that?
Because we wanted the banking industry, we didn't want one bank being able to play off another bank and suddenly going more competitive or charge exorbitant rates on these loans. So that's why as an industry we said let's make these rates prime, so it's in line pretty much with if you had to borrow in the normal course of business with security. It's an unsecured loan, but we decided to price it across the industry at prime. So it's one benchmark rate and it's easy to manage across all the banks.
Okay, if I could just whip round you all now, very briefly, closing comments, starting with you, Oliswa.
Yes, so I think as I say, Chris, this is now I think the new normal. I think we just have to adapt and take advantage of the new opportunities that will come with the situation that we found ourselves in. I think, just to echo my fellow panelists' sentiments, I think we as South Africans we are stronger together, and we've seen ourselves make it through more difficult times, and I think this is none the better. I think if we hold hands together, hold hands with government, hold hands with public stakeholders, we will see ourselves through this, and we'll come out of the other end stronger together.
Thank you very much. And someone did say the other week, the one gift that this pandemic had given to South Africa was giving back its unity. Minister, one final comment from you.
There is hope for South Africans. There is hope for the small business sector. There is hope with all the opportunities that are available. Let's seize them. Let's work together. Let's rebuild our country together, because this is an opportunity for us to rebuild, to make it more equal, to make it more accessible, to make it more competitive.
Well, thank you very much indeed. That was the Minister for Development of Small Business, Khumbudzo Chabeni. That was Ben Bierman of Business Partners. That was Carl Kumbie, the CEO of Mercantile Bank, and Olisa Nkodi, the small businessman who owns a farm and a fleet of tuk-tuks you might see out here one day if you ever pass through Sandton. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for on this first historic Zoom and broadcast called Business Tomorrow. We hope in the next few weeks to be challenging people to look at the future and to see how we can get business up and running again. Next week, we hope to tackle the tourism and hospitality industry in detail again. Do try and catch us again at the same time next week here on CNBC Africa across 48 countries in Africa and 16 million homes. From me, Chris Bishop, and the team here at Business Tomorrow, it's goodbye.